anyone who's listening who thinks that it's safe to be LGBTQ plus in this country, it isn't. I lived in a very insular bubble. I'm very progressive. I was progressive before I thought I was
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus. I'm from a progressive family, progressive friends, all of that. And I had no idea. I did not understand what it was like to walk in the world without heterosexual privilege.
Hi, I'm Biz Cush, a life coach and therapist, and your host here on the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. We're talking to women all over the world who found their way back to themselves, to their inner knowing, to their intuition, to their wisest self. We're exploring how to feel alive, authentic, engaged, and fully present in your life. Let's awaken your wise woman. Hi, I'm Biz Cush, and this is the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. Thanks for being here. The podcast is actually on a break for the summer, but we are resharing some older episodes, and it felt important to share some episodes that were relevant to Pride Month. With all the disruption in the world right now and all the pushback against trans people as well as all people in the LGBTQIA plus community, I wanted to highlight some of their voices. So this week we've got a replay of my conversation with Suzette Mullen, who came out later in life, and it's a lovely conversation, so I hope you enjoy that. Also, in June, we are still hosting meetups for highly sensitive women. So if you wanted to hang out with me for an hour, a little over an hour, for only $20, we can hang out on Zoom. The next meetup is on June 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find out more on my website, elizabethcush.com. At the top of the page, there is a button where you can find out more about the meetup, but also register for the event. So I hope you'll join me. I also hope you enjoy this conversation with Suzette Mullen. Hi, Suzette, and welcome to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast.
Thanks, Biz. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. I'm glad it worked out that we were able to schedule this. And I'm really excited to talk to you about your book and your journey. But if you could share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and what inspires you, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm Suzette Mullen. I am an author. I'm also a book coach. I work with memoir and nonfiction writers and have a special interest in working with the LGBTQ plus community. I'm also a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, and all the other things. And what inspires me? I love that question. And how I'm going to answer it today would be I'm inspired by other really smart, interesting women and having conversations with them. That really gives me life. I'm fortunate that I'm part of several communities, both online and in person, where I get to have conversations of depth that I just love. I love the connections. So there's other things that inspire me, but today that'll be my answer.
Nice, nice. Well, they inspire me too, which is why I love my podcast, is that, it's focused on women and women who are willing to sort of share their more vulnerable side and their journeys. And I'm honored to have you here on the podcast and appreciate your being here.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I know your book just came out not long ago. I will admit I have not read the whole thing, but I have looked through it and it feels like an important book to be out there in the world. And I just wondered if you could share a little bit about what prompted you. So your book, The Only Way Through, is out, but there's also some words scribbled out in between the through is and out. And I just hope you would share a little bit about what, got you to write this and put your
Sure.
story out there in the world, because that's courageous, I think.
Yes, I mean, and believe me, there've been moments where I've asked myself that question. No, just kidding. But I have always loved to write, and there were different times along the way in my adult life that I tried to really lean into an identity as a writer. And I just wasn't able to for various reasons. And when I was in my early 50s, my nest was empty. I have two young adult sons now, and my youngest had gone off to college. And I was really examining what I wanted my next chapter to look like. And I thought that it was going to be about making a change professionally. And as I've said on several interviews, spoiler alert, there were some other surprises along the way, which we'll talk about about my story. But I made the decision that I was going to go all in with writing, and I was really going to claim that identity as a writer and go all in. And I began writing a memoir about my professional journey and really my struggle to create a professional life that felt aligned with who I was. That was the question that I wanted to examine. You know, that question that everyone asks you when they first meet you, what do you do?
Yeah.
And I had been an attorney early on, and then a stay-at-home mom, and various other roles along the way. But I was really struggling to find professional purpose, and I wanted to examine what that had really all been about. So I was writing a memoir related to that issue. And in the course of writing that memoir, a different story emerged. And it was a story about a very intense friendship I had with a female friend that I had had for a long time. And that's kind of what sets the story in motion that I tell in The Only Way Through Is Out. So it's a bit meta. I was writing a memoir about something else. And in the course of writing that memoir, this other story emerged. And then I lived the other story. And then I decided to write about it. As I was living the story, it was clear to me that I needed to write about it. There was kind of no doubt in my mind, not understanding necessarily where the story would go and what I would do with it, but I needed to write about it. I needed to first write it for myself to kind of understand what had happened and connect the dots. And having claimed that call as a writer, it was something I had to do. So that's kind of how this all unfolded.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and interesting how writing can sort of, like, you think you have this purpose of, like, I'm going to write about this job journey or whatever, finding purpose in work, and then suddenly through the writing unfolds this other story. I'm wondering, would that be something you feel comfortable sharing here? Like, what did unfold in your writing, and how was that for you to come to this realization that you'd been living a life that was very different than what was in your heart, is what I have read from your book.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. I'm happy to share the high level story. And then when people get to read the book, they'll get to get all the juicy details about what unfolded. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I started, as I mentioned, I was writing this other story, and then this story about this female friendship emerged, which was not terribly surprising because this person, who I call Rini in my book, this friend, was very involved in lots of parts of my life. So it wasn't entirely surprising that she would emerge in a story that I was writing about my professional journey. But I started to see that relationship differently, and that really set in motion a journey of discovery and about identity and really what was really true for me. And so there was that first, like, what is really true about this friendship? Is it just a friendship, or is it something more than that? And coming to terms with the reality of what the feelings I had for this friend. And then the journey. So coming to terms with, yes, I'd been in love with this friend. I didn't just love her as a friend, but I had been in love with her, and I still was. which was terrifying because I was in a long-term marriage. I had a very, very nice life that I share some of the details of that life in the book. It was by most standards, it was a life that people would have envied and had aspired to, and it looked really, really great on the outside. And there were a lot of really good things about it. And I had absolutely no intention ever of leaving this very nice life that I had. So that's kind of where we are in the beginning of the story. And then this inner revelation emerges, and I'm then forced to, well, what do I do about it? You know, first of all, what's true, and then coming to terms with both what that friendship was really about, and then, well, maybe it was just her, and then really coming to terms with, no, it wasn't just her, and yes, I'm attracted to women in general, and then what do I do about this, if anything? And that's really what the story is about listening first, you know, listening to your inner voice. I personify the voice in the story. I call it the voice. It becomes a character, really. And can I trust the voice? And what is the voice saying to me? And then do I have the courage to act on what I'm hearing? And not only do I have the courage, that was a big part of it, but then the other part was, for me, was what is the right thing to do? Integrity is probably my number one core value. And I wanted to be in integrity, both with myself, with my marriage, with my relationships. And I really wanted to do the right thing. And I didn't know what that was for a really long time. And the idea of making a choice, and for me, it was about, do I act on or live out what I now understand to be my sexual identity? And there wasn't room for me to explore that within my marriage. So it was like, I stay in my marriage and I just kind of tamp it down and, you know, and try to find a way to enjoy the very nice life I have, and just that this is a part of me that I don't know and I will never know as long as I'm still married. Or do I leave this very nice life I have with a lovely man, and which will obviously impact him and other people, for a life that frankly I'd only been living in my head, because I had not had any actual experience of intimacy with a woman. And it was, as you can probably imagine, it was a terrifying decision, a terrifying choice to be faced with.
Well, and it's almost what I'm hearing too is like the choice of like leaving this very sort of safe, secure, almost like approved life, right? In our culture, you know, married to a man, children, happy life, whatever, to this unknown that potentially not dangerous, but in some ways in our culture today feels a little scary. I mean,
oh yeah, I mean, timely in the town that I live in right now, which overall I really love. And there's a lot of really wonderful things here, and readers will learn how I got here in the story. And we had a whole really terrible situation literally this weekend, where a drag story hour at the local library was canceled because of bomb threats. And there were death threats sent to the head of the library, to the head of the organization that was sponsoring it. So, I mean, for anyone who's listening, this is something I do want to say, and I'm going to try to say it succinctly. Anyone who's listening who thinks that it's safe to be LGBTQ plus in this country, it isn't. I lived in a very insular bubble. I'm very progressive. I was progressive before I thought I was LGBTQ plus. I'm from a progressive family, progressive friends, all of that. And I had no idea. I did not understand what it was like to walk in the world without heterosexual privilege. And I know that's not the focus of our conversation, but I do
but
feel
I appreciate your bringing that forward.
I do feel it's an important thing to say, and it's part of what, it's not the central point of my book, but I think that one of the things that I have learned is how much I didn't understand and I didn't know. And so, yes, back to your point about stepping into a future that potentially wasn't safe. I have to say, when I was at that decision point, the proverbial creeping up to the edge of the cliff and looking over, because I knew that once I jumped, there was no turning back. This was not a, leaving a marriage. There was no turning back here. I didn't want to make a mistake. That was really, really important to me. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and making mistakes was terrifying and still is pretty hard for me. But what I do want to say is that I really wasn't thinking so much about, oh, what is it going to be like to walk in the world as somebody in the LGBTQ plus community? Because I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant. But what I was scared about and terrified about was creating or really starting over completely in my 50s. I had been with my husband. I mean, we met when I was 22. We were married for 30 years. We grew up together. I had had a partner my entire adult life.
Yeah.
I'd walked in the world as a woman married to a man, and all of the things that we take for granted when we have a partner, and the things that we don't have to do because we have a partner who does those things. I really didn't know if I could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was like I was right before the interview, I was kind of just flipping through and reading different sections. And there was one section where you're like, I always had somebody in my life that would fix things. And now I have to be the person that figures out how to do it. And I could totally relate to that because we get, well, and I don't know if complacent is the right word, but we get comfortable with our roles in relationship. Like, you take care of this, I can do this.
Right.
And to step away and suddenly be like, now it's all on me.
Yeah. I mean, so that's one of the things that was important to me as I was writing the book and thinking about who my readers would be. And obviously, the bullseye target would be other women in particular who were questioning their sexuality, coming out later in life, so they would identify with the very, precise story I was telling. But I always also had a different audience in mind, which were primarily women, although it's been a pleasant surprise. I've been hearing from men, which is really, really cool. But we're on a podcast talking about women, and all along I had a midlife women audience in mind. And it wasn't, yes, the specific context of my story is a revelation at midlife about my sexual identity, and then a decision about what, if anything, I'm going to do about it. But I think that all along I was thinking about more universal themes that most of us, if not all of us, confront at different times of our life. And I think midlife is obviously a time when we're examining, is this all there is to my life, or things that we have given up or we longed for, and we wonder, is it too late for me? And the idea of stepping into something new, and it doesn't have to be something as dramatic as coming out, but whether it's a new job, there's so many other things. And it's scary. It's vulnerable. Can I do it? I'm in my early 50s, my mid 50s, I'm in my 60s and beyond. Am I capable of reinventing myself? Am I capable of, I know what my life looks like now, and yeah, maybe there's things missing, but I don't know what that other thing is going to look like on the other side. And it's scary. So I wrote my book for really any human who was longing to live more authentically, or as I say in my dedication, longing to live out loud, but maybe is afraid of the cost of doing that.
Yes, yes, yes. And I feel like so many of the conversations that I've had here are around that, right? Like to recognize at some point in your life, midlife, that things need to change. And one, it's scary, but two, I'm hopeful that the stories that I'm sharing are women who've like, I've did this, like, and it's and I've come on the other side and actually I'm better for it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on book tour the last couple of weeks, which is why my voice is a little bit husky. This is my sexy, husky, sexy voice. But one of the questions I've been asked a number of times is, are you going to write another book, or what's next, and all of that? And the answer is yes. I am already percolating an idea for the next book. And what I want to really examine is what happens after the leap, right? So, I mean, this book really kind of ends shortly after I do make a big decision and after the leap, but it ends really not too far in time after that. And now I've lived 7 years on the other side of that leap. And I really want to examine both the costs of authenticity, because there are costs at least, and the joys. So it's both of those things. And that's what the next book will be about. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Well, and I love that too, that like I would imagine, I mean, being in a heterosexual relationship with children, like I would imagine there were costs of leaving and starting something new and coming out and saying, hey, actually, it's women that I'm attracted to, not men. I don't know how it was received in your family, but I would imagine there was some disruption.
When you get back to the book, you will get to see that with the key players. And there was a mix of responses. And so, yeah, there's that initial disruption and disorientation. And, in my case, it was big, right? I mean, it wasn't just, this is who I'm attracted to. It's like, we're getting divorced. And I mean, my children were grown at the time, but there's no doubt divorce is hard, no matter what the situation is. Even good divorces are hard, and amicable divorces are hard. But I guess it's not really a spoiler alert because I haven't written the next book yet, but what the reality is that when you let go of something that had good in it, I'm not talking about letting go of something that was toxic or abusive, but that wasn't my situation. But when you let go of something that you loved and that had meaning for you, there's grief. I mean, there's absolutely grief. And I mean, I know you're a therapist, and
yes, I am.
Grief is, as everyone, nobody goes through life without experiencing grief, and in whatever context they experience it. And grief is not linear. It comes at unexpected times. I mean, there are times where it's a bit more predictable, like whether it's an anniversary or a holiday, a family holiday, and those things and they were painful. And there's still moments, even 7 years on the other side, where it's less raw, but there's still, I see other people that are in my life who have, are now on their 35th wedding anniversary and their 40th anniversary, and I don't have that. I mean, I have another life, which is I'm very happy with, but there's So in other words, there are costs, and there is also the joy. So I want to really explore all the real afterwards, because I don't want anyone to be left with a false impression that either it's all really, really hard and it's all impossible, or it's all, rainbows and
unicorns or whatever,
yeah,
butterflies, right?
right.
Right.
Unicorns and all the things. And it's both and, which is what life is, right?
I was going to say, it's such a great message because that's what life is, right? Like we're not happy all the time. We're not depressed all the time, even though when we're sad, it might feel that way. But yeah, it's both. We have all of it. But that's what makes life interesting too, right? That's what makes us human and keeps things lively.
Yeah. And speaking to women in particular who are facing what feels like a very big decision, whether it is about a marriage, where they're going to live, even a friendship. I mean, again, I'm not going to give too much away that's in the book, but I had this whole thing gets set in motion with a very, very important friendship that I have. And we have friendships that change over time and that we may need to make different decisions about. So what I would say, at least what I hope people will take from my story is, yes, while there is pain, there is difficulty getting to the other side. So all of those costs, it's worth the cost. Living authentically and living truly aligned with who you are, there really is not another feeling like that. At least that's how it's been for me.
Yeah, that feels really important just to, well, hearing you say it, but it just feels really important inside for me too, to sort of really live being a person who was very good at sort of holding in feelings and needs and not sharing what I needed to step into a new part of my life where I do speak up for myself and I do ask for what I need. Like, even though it can be hard and uncomfortable and difficult, it's lovely. It's so much more fulfilling to
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
like you are.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what sort of surprised me as I was writing this book, and what we do as memoir writers is we're revisiting our past, and we're trying to make connections. We're trying to understand why we did some of the things that we did, and some choices that appear to be perplexing on their face, and all of these things. And one of the things that sort of surprised me was, and a question I really wanted to explore is, I mean, here I was, a highly educated, not to pat myself on the back, but intelligent woman coming from a progressive background. I mean, it wasn't like I was from, some conservative religious background that, put women in their place and all of that. I viewed myself as a very equal partner in my first marriage and all of those things. And yet I made choices along the way that I now see were not on there was nothing wrong with the choices on their face. I mean, example, I left my job in the law after 3 years of practice, and because I was in what I now recognize was a toxic environment. So this is in my late 20s, right? And I become a stay-at-home mom, and I have huge respect for stay-at-home moms. So this is not about there's anything wrong with being a stay-at-home mom. It was not the right choice for me for many reasons. And yet I stayed in that space for so long. And I really started losing myself. I see now, I didn't understand it at the time, but I was losing myself in my marriage, in my identity as somebody outside of the mother of two very active young boys. And I couldn't see it at the time, but then looking back and putting all the pieces together, it's perplexing to me that somebody who had always perceived herself to be independent, and I wasn't living that way, and I really wasn't taking agency over my own life. And the book opens with me looking at some of my friends who seem to be stepping into their lives fully, are taking agency over their lives. And I see a look on their face. I see this glow that they have. And it's like, I know I want that. I want that so badly. But I don't, as the book opens, I don't understand why I haven't been able to step into that. And, that's really a big part of what the book is about, is that journey, is to step into really my own identity, not just as about my sexual identity, but taking agency over my life that I had somehow given up.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it wasn't like anybody forced you into that decision, but it's choices we make for lots of good reasons, right? The work environment was toxic. And it's also not necessarily stay-at-home moms, but sort of a lack of agency for women is such a common story, I think, whether it's in their job or their life or their personal relationships, like whatever it is. It's nice to just hear you share how important that was for you to find that again and bring it back.
It was kind of perplexing to me looking back to see exactly what you said. We make choices in the moment. And what I come to really believe, and this has actually been really healing for me, because I spent a lot of time before I was writing this book beating myself up about some of the choices that I had made, judging myself for the choices that I had made. Why did I do that? Why didn't I figure out a different job? And, why did I stay? All of those why questions, and really blaming and shaming and all of that. And one of the healing things about having looked back on my life and connected the dots is really seeing that is having compassion for my younger self, is seeing that I made the best choices. I made the best choices I was capable of making at the time. And just kind of, really finding compassion and not staying in that place of judgment and regret. And that's been personally very healing for me.
Well, I think that is such an important piece of healing too, because it is easy to look back and say, why did I, or I shouldn't have, or shame on me for having made these choices or doing that thing, whatever it is, right? Like, I slept with that guy and I shouldn't have, or whatever it was, right?
Sure.
Or girl or whatever. But to be able to, as you said, like you made the choices with what you had at the time, right? Like you
exactly
are not this evolved person that you are. You were not then. You were an imperfect human.
Exactly. And we don't have a crystal ball to see where these choices are going to lead. Exactly. But one of another gift of looking back on your life, whether you end up writing a memoir about it and putting it out in the world, but looking back on your life is to just see that you can see the repercussions of some of those choices, and maybe it helps you make different choices going forward. Whenever I have a chance to speak with younger women and there's an opportunity and there's an opening to talk about my experience as a a young professional and giving up a career again, that turns out it was not the right choice for me. I think I have some things I can share to younger generations also about how things unfolded for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your sharing so much of your story. And for people who are curious, they can find the book. But if you had a piece of wisdom that you felt was important to share with the listeners, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a two, can I give a two-parter? A
Sure.
two-parter. I think this is really true, well beyond the particular context of my story. The two parts and really what had carried me to where I am today are both learning to trust myself, learning to trust what I was hearing inside myself. I, for so long, was looking to other people to answer questions that only I could answer. And I know it's a bit of a cliche that the answers are inside us, but I think it's the truth. And so to to find that quiet, to listen to what's within, and then to find the courage to act on it. So that's sort of part one. And part two, which might sound contradictory, but I feel like they're complementary, is to find your people. Not to find your people to tell you what to do, but to find your people to support you in your journey, whatever it is. And part of the challenge I had, and that readers will learn when they read The Only Way Through Is Out, is I felt very, very alone in the early part of my journey. I really didn't know another single person that was experiencing the things I was experiencing. And it was a very lonely and scary place to be. And it was when I finally connected with other people who were in a similar situation that they carried me when I couldn't carry myself. And I mean, I think that's true for whatever we're going through or whatever we're experiencing, is to find your people, and whether you find them online or in person and in real life, or hopefully in both of those situations. These types of journeys are not journeys that you want to take alone. You really do need your people.
Community and connection is so important. Yeah. And support. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Suzette, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Could you share for the listeners how they find you and your book?
Sure, absolutely. So the book, again, is The Only Way Through Is Out. I'm sure you'll be sharing
Yes.
show links.
Yep.
It's available at all major retailers. I do love to put in a plug for local independent bookstores. And if you have one in your town, please consider ordering it from your bookstore. But it's available everywhere. And my website is yourstoryfinder.com. And I've got more information about the book there. I'm also a book coach, and I do coach memoir writers. And so I've got information there about my book coaching offerings. And then as far as social media, I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle, it's a little odd because somebody took Your Story Finder, so I had to come up with a different one. So it's the letters UR Story Finder. That is my handle on Instagram, and I love engaging there with other people and readers and all the things. So those are the places where you can find the book and connect with me.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely include all of that info in the show notes. And I really, once again, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and your wisdom and a little bit about you.
Thank you so much, Biz.
Well, I really enjoyed my conversation with Suzette Mullen and her sharing about what inspired her to write her book, but also just to hear parts of her story of coming out and the shifts that she made in midlife to find a life that fit her more authentically and really lived from her heart. And I just, as always, appreciate women on the podcast here, the women who show up and share their stories in honest and open, vulnerable ways. And Suzette is no exception to that, because it takes courage to put yourself out there in this medium, or any medium, but to show up in a way that you are kind of exposing yourself to the public. And it's brave, courageous, and I just am honored to be able to share midlife women's stories, wise women's stories, stories of healing and change and transition and all of that. So I really appreciate you all listening too and being a part of the podcast. And if you're interested in learning more about working with me, you can find me at elizabethcushcoaching.com, where you will find my group coaching offers, as well as the podcast and one-on-one ways to work with me as well as a life coach. I hope you will pick up Suzette's book, The Only Way Through is Out, and give it a read. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to connecting with you back here on the podcast. Thanks for listening to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Music by Andy Cush, sound editing by Laura Disler, and show notes by Kathy Cush. If you'd like more information about me, Biz Cush, and the resources shared today, go to awakenyourwisewoman.com.